Hello everyone! How are you guys doing? I hope that you're doing well. In this recording, we're going to talk about measuring market concentration. Let's begin. In measuring market concentration, the first step that we need to think about is defining the boundaries of a market. When it comes to the question of defining the boundaries of a market, at first, many people will think that, well, this should be a fairly straightforward, trivial task. Interestingly, over the past years, while I was teaching this course, I realized that even though it may at first seem like a trivial task, a lot of people actually make mistakes about this and potentially make suboptimal managerial decisions. Okay, so now how do we define the boundaries of a market? I'm going to explain the main ideas behind this using two very simple examples. First, let's consider Tesco and Sainsbury. Let me open a parenthesis here. In case you're not from UK, these two are basically very popular supermarkets in the United Kingdom. So what would you say if I ask you, do you think Tesco and Sainsbury, are they competing with each other in the same market? So when I ask this question in class, generally, almost all students will say, well, of course, they're both supermarkets, and they're similar in terms of their products, so of course they should be considered in the same market. How about the next example? So what would you say if I ask you, Air France, which is an airline company, and TGV, which is a high-speed rail service in France, are they competing with each other in the same market? So when I ask this question in class, I generally get mixed answers. There will be a group of students who will say, well, they can't possibly be in the same market, right? Because there's a completely different sectors. One is an airline and the other one is a high-speed rail service. And there will be a group of students who will look very confused and will be scared to say anything. So they will remain silent despite, how much I push them. And then there will be at least a couple of students who will be brave enough to argue that, well, these two companies should be, of course, considered in the same market. And they've argued that, well, the airlines and the high-speed rail service, in terms of the customer experiences, it might be completely different. But when you define the market at a broader level as a market that provides transportation services in France, then of course these two companies, or more broadly these two sectors, they should be competing, they should be considered to be competing in the same market. And the last basic group of students, the brave ones, they'll be the right ones. So why is that? Let's talk about the general principles which defines that we use in defining the boundaries of a market. In economics, we will basically argue that two firms or two sectors are considered to be competing in the same market if a price increase by one causes many of his customers to switch to the other. If airline, for instance, if they increase their prices, are customers switching to high-speed rail services? So put it differently, the firm's products or services should be close substitutes to each other. In the case of Air France and TGV, we can easily see that even though these are completely different sectors, but the services that they provide are close substitutes. So therefore, they should be considered to be in the same market. Well, here you might ask me, right? I understand it's at a conceptual level, but how do I assess the degree of substitution? Do I need to rely on my personal subjective judgment? Well, the answer is luckily, right? You don't have to rely on your personal subjective judgment. There is a way to quantify it, which then becomes an objective measure. So to quantify the degree of substitution, we basically calculate cross-price elasticity. Cross-price elasticity is defined as the percentage change in demand. Well, in our case of Air France versus TGV, it will be defined as the percentage change in demand for flights divided by the percentage change in price in fast trains. This ratio tells me if TGV, for instance, if it doubles its prices, what fraction, how much demand increase that the Air France basically experience. As a rule of thumb, as usual, we use the cutoff value of 1 if cross price elasticity is greater than 1, then we would argue that, well, these two sectors or companies, they have products or services that are sufficient to close substitutes, so therefore they should be considered in the same market. Great. Now that we learn how to define the boundaries of a market, now we need to have a way, right? We need to have a way to quantify the degree of concentration in our market. So to measure market concentration in practice, there are actually various different measures that are being used in practice. Here I want to teach you the one that is most commonly used, but also the one that is considered most reliable by academics. The measure that we commonly use in academic studies, and also the antitrust laws as well actually in developed countries, is a measure called Herfindahl index. In calculating Herfindahl index, right, so we have our market, and in our market we have a number of firms, unless it's a monopoly. For each of these firms, we want to calculate the market share. The market share of firm, well, you probably know, but just to make sure, is basically defined as the firm sales divided by the total sales in our given market. So we have the market share of each firm, and all we need to do, then plug in this formula. Herfindahl index is equal to, say, the market share of first firm, take the square, right, and do this for every single firm in our market and sum them up. That's it. So let's just think about this. What this formula does is, if you think this through a little bit, you will realize that Herfindahl index is basically will spit out a number that is between 0 and 1. Those are the boundaries of this index. A higher number of Herfindahl index will indicate a more concentrated market. How can we see that? Well, to see this actually, let's look at two extreme cases. The first case is a monopoly. If I have a market which have only one firm, which is a monopoly, then as you can see, basically Herfindahl index will be just equal to 1 square, right? Because there's only one firm, all of these numbers will be 0, and for that one firm, S1 is going to be equal to 1. So the Herfindahl index will be equal to 1. How about a case in which a very competitive market, which basically means, for instance, I have thousands of firms and each of them are tiny. In that case, the market share of each firm is going to be a number that is close to 0. Say it's going to be, say, 0.001, for instance. And if you take the square, so a tiny number is going to get even tinier, and you do this for every single firm in your market, then you will realize that the Herfindahl index then becomes a number that is fairly close to 0. So as you can see from the simple thought experiments, a higher Herfindahl index will indicate a more concentrated market. Just to give you a sense about the numbers that are commonly used in antitrust laws, here's an example of a commonly used convention in the US. A Herfindahl index below 1% in the US is generally considered a highly competitive market. A Herfindahl index between 1% and 15% will be considered an unconcentrated market, and a Herfindahl index between 15 to 25% is moderate concentration, and anything above 25% will be a highly concentrated market. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.